Thursday, 5th of June, 2025. Live from Television Centre in London. This is Good Morning Britain with Kate Garraway and Ed Balls.
Good morning to you. Our main news this morning, all pupils in England whose parents receive universal credit will be able to get free school meals from September next year. The government claim an extra 500,000 children will benefit from the extension of the scheme.
Charities have largely welcomed the move. The Prime Minister said it would help to tackle the stain of poverty and set children up to learn. And Nithya Rajan is at a secondary school in Birmingham. One charity, Nithya, calling it a significant step towards taking hunger out of the classroom.
Well, Ed, the government would certainly agree with that description. And to be honest, a number of campaigners have welcomed the move, especially since the system that's operated in schools like this one has been in place since 2018. And it's meant that families on universal credit who have a household income of more than £7,800 a year have missed out. Their children have missed out on free school meals. But let me bring in Vince Green here. Vince, you oversee a number of schools here in the area. I mean, this is obviously welcome news for a number of families, but teaching unions have said that essentially to see real change, all children need to access free school meals.
Well, firstly, can I say this is really welcome news today. It's a great announcement from the government and from Birmingham City Council, and I can credit to them for their hard work and all the partnership work they're doing in education and care, working in partnership with ourselves and the Education Exchange to improve life chances for children. In terms of the challenges, we've been campaigning for this for many, many years, so it's fantastic news and great to hear that more children will be able to access the free school meals. At this school, around half the children already get that free school lunch through the local authority. We already provide thousands of additional breakfasts and lunch dinners every single week across our family of schools to our families. And we don't means test any of that because we want to remove the barrier to access for those children who really need it. And this goes some way towards doing that. So for us, it's about removing barriers of access to children who really need it.
All right, Vince, thank you for that. Well, the new plans will be enrolled in September next year, but there is still some clarity needed from the government about the funding and where that money is going to come from.
Nithya, thank you very much indeed. Well, that is our top story and will be welcome news to a lot of people. Of course, when you were in education, you pushed for that for all children, didn't you, in primary school?
We did. I mean, at the time, there was a study in Hull and in London. If you gave it to every primary school children, the evidence was that kids worked harder, did better in school, were healthier. At the time, though, I think it was the 2009 spending review when I was the education secretary. The view was, you know, it cost so much money, wasn't enough money for it. And I would think Bridget Phillipson will have had exactly the same rebuff from the Treasury this time round. So, but this is definitely extending it to more children, more poor children. In London, every primary school child gets a free school meal, but that won't be the case even with this reform across the rest of England. But,
yes,
as Nithya said, more children will benefit.
Well, we're speaking to Bridget Phillipson. We can ask her about the questions she's had over funding and why it isn't for children not on universal credit and spread around the country as well when we speak to her. We'll also be discussing this with former Shadow Labour Work and Pensions Secretary Jonathan Ashworth and former Tory Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng. Welcome back. Should we have a look at the front pages this morning? The Mirror celebrates the government's decision to extend free school meals to all pupils in England whose parents claim universal credit. The paper says an extra 500,000 children will benefit and that they campaign for it.
We're joined by the former Labour Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary Jonathan Ashworth, former Conservative Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng. Both of you have worked in the Treasury. Both of you have seen in Parliament spending reviews, government trying to get some good news out, investing in local transport, free school meals for more children, but against the background of actually what's going to be still pretty painful, difficult announcements for lots of departments next week.
Well, look, I think that the free school meals announcement is a classic political move. I hate to be cynical about it, but I've seen governments do this before. The government took a battering on winter fuel payments, let's face that. So they've got to come up with something that is going to reactivate their base, which is going to motivate their troops. And I think this policy is a good one for them to try and reassert, the Labour values, which they got shredded on by announcing that they were going to withdraw winter fuel.
Although the problem, Jonathan, is that actually lots of Labour MPs, the trade unions, they don't want it to be for some children. They actually want free school meals to be, as it is in London, free for
every kid.
All children in primary schools, which I think is only a third we're talking about here.
I mean, you'll always get that. You'll always have people saying, look, let's go further, let's have more. But this is a good policy. We know there are so many kids who are growing up in poverty, who are at school with empty tummies, not able to concentrate on their work. I think it's a really good policy, and it's exactly why someone like me is a Labour, I'm a Labour politician or ex-Labour politician. This is why I want to see a Labour government to do policies like this. They've got to go further, in my view, on things like child poverty. They've got to look at the benefit system and all these complicated restrictions in the benefit systems, like something like the two-child cap that we talked about before. But this is a good thing, and I think there'll be a lot of Labour supporters across the country who will be pleased at this.
I mean, nobody's against more children getting fed that need it, are they? I don't think anybody would stand on that platform. The problem is the money and and how it's best allocated. So the IFS say that actually this is going to cost about £1 billion in today's prices and benefit 1.7 million children, whereas, as you just referenced, lifting the two-child cap benefit would be a more efficient way of spending money. And, of course, this area is not the only area asking for cash.
But I think Jonathan's response actually reinforces what I said. I think this is a good political announcement because they've shredded so much goodwill on the winter fuel.
But that's tough on politicians, isn't it? Because if they make a good political announcement, then that's good. And if they make a bad one, they can't win. They're just making a good policy.
There's always a context. There's always a context. And you said yourself that this is against the backdrop of very tight public finances. And I think they needed a political win, and that's what they're trying to do.
I mean, it's not just about policy, though.
But it's not just about the politics, though. It is a good thing for the country if children are getting a good hot meal in school, which means they're not hungry. It means they can focus on their learning. I mean, I strongly believe, it's a bit of a cliche to say it, but I genuinely believe that investing in children is one of the best things you can do for the future of the country.
No, that makes sense. But I just think, I mean, I hate to be cynical, as I said, but there is a political context here, and that's all I'm referring to.
I don't think you hate to be cynical. I mean, I think you've just been a bit cynical, and that's fine.
No, but I mean, I've been there. I know what the calculus is.
Arjun is at a secondary school in Birmingham. Nithya, charities welcoming the move, although some saying that they should be going further and doing it for all children. But at the same time, the government is still under pressure to scrap the two-child benefit cap, which would also help lift children out of poverty.
Morning, Ed. Yeah, I think the main point that charities are aiming to make, campaigners are aiming to make, is that access to food is one aspect of child poverty and lifting families above the threshold. Now, here, 50% of kids come here to get their free school meal. But at the moment, that system that's been in place since 2018, it ensures that families that are earning more than £7,400 per year household income and on universal credit won't get that free school meal. And this is essentially welcome news for families that would kind of miss out. But really, the campaigners here at this school are keen to highlight, Vince Green, for example, you're keen to highlight that it's not just food, isn't it, that's part of alleviating poverty from families here in Birmingham and around the country?
Well, that's correct. But firstly, can I just say this is really welcome news, and credit to our government and Birmingham City Council on making this decision. Across Summit Learning Trust family of schools, we have well over half of our children that already access this free school meal, this lunch from the local authority. But we provide additionally thousands of free breakfasts and dinners every single week. We provide free uniform, free health and hygiene products and digital access to hundreds of families on top of that as well. So anything that can be done to improve that universal offer for those children that really need that support would be very welcome.
All right, Vince, thank you. And I think keen to highlight this morning, campaigners are welcoming the announcement, but they say other things like capping uniform costs need to be looked at in order for families living in poverty to be lifted out of it.
Thank you very much indeed, Nithya. That is our top story this morning. And we're going to be joined by the Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, to talk about that and other things and money within government and where it can be allocated.
The government is saying today that school pupils whose families claim universal credit will now be eligible for free school meals.
It says the new measures, which will be introduced in September 2026, will lift 100,000 children out of poverty in England. Well, Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson joins us now with a big smile on her face. I'm sure you're thrilled at those figures, 100,000 children coming out of poverty. No one's going to say that is a bad thing. But how are you going to pay for this?
Yeah, I am delighted, and it's great news for your viewers because it will mean that they're seeing a lot of money back in their pockets. It's £500 per child per year for those who will now be eligible, and it will also really boost children's attainment at school. It will make a big difference. We know if children are hungry, it's really hard to concentrate and to learn. In terms of how this is funded, it's £1 billion investment over the course of the spending review period. All of the detail around it will be set out next week as part of the spending review in full. But there is a plan to pay for this. We want to do this seriously and do it credibly, but it's a game changer for families. It will make a really big difference, and it will lift 100,000 children out of poverty.
It's a game changer for those families that are entitled to it, fingers crossed. But the IFS challenges your figures and says it won't lead to that number of children being brought out of poverty. And more than that, there are better ways of doing this, like lifting the two-child benefit cap.
So I think the distinction between what I'm saying and what the IFS have said is just a difference around the timeline in question. But it's 100,000 children over the course of the Parliament. It will benefit directly 500,000 families. So it's putting money back into parents' pockets, and it will make a huge, huge difference. The system at the moment, it doesn't catch as many hard-working, low-income families as it should. The change I'm announcing today with the Work and Pensions Secretary, Liz Kendall, will make a big difference. And we're co-chairing that Child Poverty Task Force together. You mentioned other social security changes. We're looking at all of that because we've got to look at every way that we can lift more children out of poverty. It is a moral stain on our country that right now, as I speak to you, lots and lots of children are growing up in poverty. It's far too high. It has an impact on children, on their life chances. It has an effect on all of us as a society. And I spent, some of my childhood on free school meals. I spent some of my childhood in poverty. It's really personal to me because I know how it makes you feel. And if we can stop children feeling that way, if we can really ease the burden on families and help them out, then I think that is the difference a Labour government brings. Can
I read to you a couple of, we've had loads of comments this morning, lots of them welcoming the targeting of child poverty. But Kay says, I work in a primary school and think every child should get a free school meal. Hunter says, you will find a lot of working parents who aren't entitled to universal credit are going to food banks these days. Nigel, I agree with the free school meals, but there are as many people that work full-time on low wages that struggle as well. You'll know in London, all children get free school meals in primary school. When I was doing your job, I tried to get free school meals for all primary school students, was rebuffed by the Treasury, who said it was unaffordable. Did you make the case to the Treasury for all children in primary schools to get free school meals, or did you decide just to make do with only the poorest families?
I won't be divulging details in my conversation with the Treasury. I think you'll know why that is from your experience, Ed. But what I can say is that, look, the public finances are in a difficult position. We all know that the economy has faced some big challenges over the years, and that's why we've got to target what we spend. But even though we're targeting this measure, it's 500,000 children. I mean, that is a huge, huge number of children that will benefit from this. And it is hard-working people. It is people that go out to work but earn often low wages. And because of that, weren't eligible in the way that it was previously set up to get free school meals. This, as I said, is £500 per child per year back into families' pockets. And that's one of a number of measures that we're taking as a government to support families. For example, we're also rolling out free breakfast clubs in our primary schools. We're increasing the minimum wage and we're cutting uniform costs. All measures designed to support families, but also to help children at school, because it does make a big difference to what they can achieve as well.
Can I ask you about schools? We know that the Chancellor said yesterday it's a tough spending review. Lots of disappointed cabinet ministers. We know that health and defence are winners. Widely reported that you're one of the departments which will get a very tough settlement. So you're announcing the good news today. But how about more widely in schools? When the settlement comes, are you going to be able to guarantee that we'll have the same number or more teachers and teaching assistants for the next 3 years? Or are you going to have to accept a tough settlement where you see over the next few years fewer teachers and larger class sizes?
Look, it's a challenge all around. It's a challenge for all of us. I'm afraid I'm not going to speculate more widely. You'll only have to wait until next week to see the full details of the spending review. But at the budget, what you saw was a Chancellor who was investing in our children, in their futures and in their life chances. It's why we've boosted schools' budgets already, why we've been able to pay our teachers more, because we think it's right that the people that provide that brilliant education get the backing that they deserve. And it's the single biggest way you can improve the quality of education for children. But, you know, it is challenging. Of course it is. I think everybody recognises that the public finances were left in a terrible mess by the last government. But because we're stabilising that, because we're turning things around, we are able to make different choices, Labour choices, around supporting families, choices like the one I'm announcing today that, frankly, you would not be hearing from Conservative or Reform politicians.
But there could be fewer teachers and larger class sizes in the settlement. You're not going to kind of rule that out. That's something which might happen.
Well, we're publishing data later this morning about the numbers of teachers in our schools. I can't give you those exact numbers because they're due to come, but I can tell you the numbers are moving in the right direction and we need more teachers in our classrooms.
I'm slightly fearful as I ask this, you'll have to say wait and see, but I'm sure you hear all the time from teachers that the budgets are on their knees anyway, and now by agreeing the settlement of increase of pay, they're having to find a chunk of that, I know you're paying some, find a chunk of that out of their budgets, and they've already had to reduce, you know, various support like teaching assistants, like SEND, all those things in schools. So schools are going to be thinking, well, you say you've given us more, but actually, in order for our teachers to be rewarded, we end up with less.
Look, I have been upfront with schools about the challenges we face, and schools, like other areas of the public sector, are going to have to find some smarter ways of working. That's just the reality of where we are at the moment. So the Teachers' Pay Award that you referenced there, that's 4%.
Sorry to interrupt, but do you have any idea of those smarter ways of working? Because the head teachers I talk to don't.
I do, and I take my responsibility seriously to work with schools to deliver that. So one real example I can give you, we've worked with 400 schools around bulk buying of energy contracts. The schools that have taken part have seen a reduction by over a third in their energy costs. That's a big difference. So we want to work with schools, particularly on those areas of what they're spending that aren't on their workforce, to bring down costs, whether it's energy, procurement, how they recruit in terms of teacher vacancies. Practical examples of ways in which we're helping schools to save money. Yes, there is more to do. I'm not for one moment suggesting it's easy. I've been upfront with schools about that. But the Teachers' Pay Award that we accepted, we'd been clear for some time that we would be asking schools to pay for the first 1%. The rest of that, the 3%, we are funding and supporting. And we are putting more money into our schools, even with the backdrop of what is pretty challenging. We are investing in education because we know that's how we invest in our country's future and invest in our children.
Well, the head teachers I talked to say they've done those things already, but we'll have to wait and see. Did you want to say anything?
Bridget Phillipson, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. Still to come, we'll be discussing the impact of free school lunches for thousands more children with Jonathan Ashworth with Kwasi Kwarteng next.
Thank you very much indeed.
We're joined by the former Labour Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary Jonathan Ashworth, former Conservative Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng, and Bridget Phillipson was announcing, you know, good news on tackling child poverty. But we were talking yesterday about who's going to be the lucky ones in the spending review and who's going to have a tough settlement. Reading between the lines, did you think Bridget Phillipson and education are going to come out of this spending review as one of the winners or not?
Well, we know that the priorities for this government are defence, because we're in a very uncertain world and the government's going to increase defence expenditure. The NHS, we expect, will do well again, because we know that the NHS has been in a complete state after 14 years of the Tories and they need to turn it around. And that's what the voters want them to turn around as well. And look, this is really, what's been announced today is a big thing. It's a good thing that there's going to be more children getting access to free school meals.
But the wider questions we were asking, Kate and I were asking about what this will mean for schools and for teaching and the wider education budget, reading between the lines, it sounded like it will be tough.
Well, it will be a tight settlement because there's not as much money to go around as there would have been 20 years ago.
It's all being spent on defence.
No, but the proof of the pudding, as you will know, will be in the autumn budget. Because, yes, the spending review will outline, you know, the envelope, as it were, how much is going to be allocated. But the economy could be in a very different place in the autumn budget. And if, as it could be likely, the growth figures are revised down, the Chancellor will have to find more money in the form of probably tax rises, because I don't think there's any appetite for spending cuts.
Yeah, but
And that will set the frame for next year.
I mean, it won't turn it around by the autumn, but yesterday, Rachel Reeves, she went up to, I think it was Rochdale, and she announced new train links, new tram links. I mean, that's obviously going to take time, got to build them. But
That's
things
very
like
long
that
term.
but those are the sorts of things that you do to get the economy moving over a number of
But the
years.
international forecast of the OECD this
gone
week
down.
revised down growth for
That's
this
right.
year and next year because of the global
Yeah, in the short
situation
term.
and all the Trump uncertainty.
In the short term, it's not going to get her out of the corner, but that are the sort of things that a government who is investing for the long term should be
But
looking
what's
at.
interesting to me is that they started at the beginning of the year, beginning of their term, trying to reduce public spending. That's why they cut out they removed the winter fuel payment. They had benefits reforms that were essentially cuts in spending, and now they've done a U-turn on that. I'm very interested to see how this story ends this year.
You think it doesn't add up? Is
In
what you're saying?
terms, well, let's just see, because something's got to give. Because if you're reversing spending cuts, so you're spending the money, and you're going to increase spending on defence, how is that going to be paid for?
Because she said-
Presumably through tax.
Well,
rates.
she said she's not going to increase tax. She's made big commitments on VAT and income tax. So she is in a bit of a corner there. But
It's tricky. I don't see how you're going to get out of this.
Keir Starmer said on Tuesday the reason why he can do a U-turn on winter fuel allowance is because the economy's growing
Doing
more
really well.
strongly
But if the OECD
and
has
interest
revised-
rates are falling.
But if
Yeah.
if the OECD has revised it down this week, the forecast down this week, let's just see how that ends.
yeah, well, we'll see. But the key thing, though, is that do people feel better off by the time of the next general election, which is not for 4 years?
That's right.
And if you had interest rates falling over the next few years, that price rises have stabilised, there are these, families are a bit better off because they're not paying for for school meals. That's
I
not
agree
a bad
with Jonathan
place for
on
Labour.
that. I mean, people who say what the next election will be, 4 years is a hell of a long time.